Alright adventurers, if you've been playing D&D for any length of time or just watching the actual plays, you've probably heard this phrase.
How do you want to do this?
How do you want to do this? Oh, there it is.
How do you want to do this?
Matthew Mercer, how do you want to do this?
Whoa! That's what it feels like! That's cool!
It has become a D&D classic and staple, but sometimes I think this is the wrong way to go. Let me explain. Let's get into this. So yes, it is I, Nathaniel Gomezian, shopkeeper and proprietor of Gaming Treasures, and as I said, I think that sometimes how do you want to do this is actually wrong to put in front of your players. Now, before you come at me with all your pitchforks and whatnot, going, Matt Mercer hater, screw you, how dare you speak against the godlike being himself. I do understand it, and I do actually think that Matt Mercer is an amazing genius of a man who has definitely inspired a lot of people to get into the Dungeons & Dragons hobby, and I have no bad words to say about him. I also want to point out that how do you want to do this, I do think is actually a great thing to put in front of your players most of the time, because it allows them to be able to put input into the story in terms of how they defeat their enemies. Because if the DM is describing it every single time, it doesn't really have as much feeling for the players, whereas if you give that moment to the players in order to describe how they are defeating these enemies, decapitating them, shooting arrows through their eyes or assholes or whatever the hell they decide to do, it's fun for the players because they are inventing that part of the story, and I do think that that is a really good thing. However, I said not all the time. I don't think that saying like, how do you want to do this is good all of the time, and I will explain the reasons why I think this, and that is basically that if there is like a whole kind of character arc that you've got that is going on for like one of the players, so say that they're on a mission whereby basically like the main bad guy is somebody who treated them really badly in the past, is really tied onto their backstory, maybe has done things like, you know, to friends, family members or whatnot. It's basically almost like a personal vendetta for that player character, and then when we get to combat, basically when they are defeating this enemy, it's actually one of the other players who gets the end kind of like a killing blow, and you say, how do you want to do this? And they like a disembowel and like a behead and do all of these different things to them, and that basically makes like the player who, it's basically their storyline, like their personal kind of like hooks are in this storyline. It takes away from them the catharsism of being able to have them defeat the enemy and whatnot. Now I know what potentially you might gonna say is that when in combat, when it is that player's turn, just have it be that they basically defeat the enemy, but that's not always how combat goes in D&D, in terms of the fact that they could roll really poorly. Maybe that character is rolling terribly on that night and doesn't land a single blow, and that if you decide to bend the rules and be like, oh, you hit, and then basically everyone at the table being, wait a minute, but he only rolled a 7, how does he hit? Like we have been having to roll like 15s in order to hit this guy. It's almost like a pity kind of thing you're throwing to the player of, I'm giving you the final blow, how do you want to do this kind of thing? But they know they haven't earned it, and then therefore the moment is kind of lost and they kind of don't feel it as good as it should be. So that's that kind of thing whereby it's hard to say like, oh, just let them do it, and obviously if they keep missing, then you're just dragging on combat, immediately combat, continuously going around. They're rolling bad, everyone else is rolling well and hitting this person and whatnot, and they're basically, why is this guy not going down? We've done so much damage to him, and it's basically the one guy who you want to do damage to say, how do you want to do this? It's just not hitting any of their rolls. In those situations, it doesn't work, and so like you can't try and force it out that way, as I said. So like you want that player to be able to have their cathartic moment of like them being the one who, this is their storyline, this is like their whole thing. So instead of telling the player once they defeat this person, how do you want to do this, if it's not the player character whose like story is involved in, and basically explain that this person or thing or whatever it is has like crumpled down to its knees, is breathing heavily and is still conscious, but for all effective purposes, just explain to everyone around the table, this NPC is effectively unconscious. They're not unconscious, but they are effectively unconscious in terms of the fact that they are no longer going to have an effect in this combat. Basically letting the whole group know that this thing is down, don't worry about it. If there's other things to deal with in terms of other enemies, deal with them, and then it allows the person whose story that this is kind of involved with to then go up to them while they're in this weakened state to say whatever they want to say to them. Maybe they want to question them. Why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to my family, kind of thing, or whatever it is to do with their personal background story, plot points and such like that, that maybe they want to say something, maybe they want answers, and maybe they just want the thrill of killing this thing themselves because they don't even have to roll. Because as I said, this NPC is effectively unconscious and whatnot, so your player doesn't even have to roll, can do whatever damage, and they can describe how they take this thing out. But as I said, I know that you might say that that is taking away from the player who actually took them down, but as I said, if it's not actually a kind of NPC that's relevant to them in terms of it's not connected to them and there is a member of the group that is connected to, I feel like, I know that we don't like to say this is cinema and whatnot like that, and that things don't always plan out this way, but it really does give that kind of player the catharsis, as I said, and enjoyment, and they are really going to remember finally taking down whoever it is that is involved in their backstory. And as I said, I know from personal experience of being a player that this has happened to me, whereby there was basically a dragon that was really connected in with my character's backstory in terms of he put a blood curse on this whole family, corrupted his brother, tried to kill his mother. And while we were in the combat, there was a little backwards and forwards at the start, but once we got into combat, there wasn't much conversation between my character and the dragon, and another player took it down and basically decapitated it and such like that. So my player never got the catharsis of even asking why did you do this to my family, in terms of why did you put a blood curse on my family, what made my family so important that you had to do this. And so I felt as a player that I was robbed of what was my character's moment, in a manner of speaking, and I feel like sometimes that can happen. And so don't get me wrong, as I already stated earlier on in the video, how do you want to do this is an amazing trigger to be able to put in their involvement, but as I said, not always to use it. I think that it's become a staple that we always throw that in now, but sometimes you need to be able to assess the situation, know that it is to do with other player characters, like our backstories or such like that, and adapt accordingly. As I said, in maybe the way that I said, there's other ways that you might be able to go about it as well, but I feel like that is a much more nicer way to be able to have every player at the table have their fun. Now, as I said, most of the time you're still doing how you want to do it, so you might say that you're robbing the player character who's taking that NPC down, but I feel like that player should be able to know that this is obviously tied to another player's backstory, and they should want to celebrate that other player character getting their time to have whatever tete-a-tete with this kind of thing to go with their storyline. I know that sometimes in this moment you will have players that if you tell them how do you want to do this, that they do turn to the player who is their backstory and will say I step aside and allow that character to move forward and do what they want to do, but that doesn't always happen. You can't trust that they're definitely going to do that. Obviously it depends on who you've got around the table, player-wise and such like that, as to whether or not they would do that, or whether or not they just want to get the kill themselves and don't care about the other player's backstory and such like that. So, as I said, that's why to me, don't chance it, just go along these kind of lines to give that other player that satisfaction. But these could just be my thoughts. What do you think about this kind of situation? Please let me know down in the comment section down below, as well as obviously, if you enjoyed what you saw here today, then why not consider subscribing to the channel, because I make D&D content every week. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like some of the other stuff that I make. There's also the Discord channel if you want to join that, links down below, as well as the Patreon. You can join as a free member, don't have to pay a penny, and there are different resources and puzzles and such that I've done in the past, so if you want to get access to those, you can do. If you do want to pay and support the channel, honestly, thank you very much. There's a couple of STLs which you can get on the paid tiers, as well as if you do want to help support the channel financially, then why not check out the Etsy store of Gaming Treasure Chest, where you can get yourself some loot, whether or not you're trying to get a gift for yourself, a dungeon master, or players at your table, because all the things on there are designed by me and they're all Dungeons and Dragons themed, so why not check them out. If you like anything, please consider making a purchase to support the channel. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed your time, and until next time, goodbye.